Good afternoon. Thank you for waiting. My name is Bob Miller, Manager of Color Services with IT Supplies. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. This is our third webinar of the month, designed to educate and inform. Today we are joined by Jeremy Pilcher, Worldwide Solutions Architect for HP. Before we get started, I would like to mention that all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar to reduce background noise. So during the webinar, we encourage you to make a note of any questions that you have. And at the end of the presentation, we will hold a Q&A. So please type at any point any questions that you have into the questions box. At this time, it is my pleasure to go ahead and introduce Jeremy Pilcher from HP. Over to you, Jeremy.
Awesome. Thank you. So hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can. And I did send a share screen notice to you, so you should have that on your screen.
I just added it. So
excellent.
Cool. Do you see the presentation?
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So today what we want to do is go over some of the features and technologies that HP Stitch provides. And best way I know how to do it, I know we're trying to learn how to do things differently as far as a virtual world. And so some of the technologies, it's easier to show them in a PowerPoint. And then after that, we're going to go on to the printer. We're going to show the printer what it looks like printing. We're going to look at different print speeds, and then at close-ups of each one of the technologies. We'll look at print heads, and then all the other technologies that we bring to the table with HP Stitch. And then after that, do a couple close-up views, look at how it prints, and then go from there. Also, there's a couple times when I'll ask for questions. Kind of get some back and forth, some dialogue going in between to kind of shake things up. So starting out, we want to start out with a PowerPoint. And why HP Stitch? It's kind of the question of why should I move to the HP Stitch dye sublimation printers? Today we're going to look at the S500, but this technologies that we have is going to talk about, it's going to encompass all of our printer models. So we have a S300, S500, S1000. So why HP Stitch? So the biggest thing that I get questions on is Contone, halftone printer. What's the difference in these? What are we looking at? So this printer is a Contone printer. So what are some of the differences between a halftone printer and between a Contone printer? So what is halftoning? We'll start there. So if you look at the diagram here, a pixel in Photoshop is 0 to 255, and then a pixel on paper is a 0 or a 1. So and a 0 or 1 or is, on paper is the nozzle on the printer. It either spits a 0 or a 1, the nozzle spits. So to proceed from a Contone to a halftoning image, there's several technical transformation techniques that must take place in order for it to go into a single pipeline. Now this pipeline contains a linearization, maximum amount of ink per channel, color mapping, and several other actions that we won't describe in detail right now. But this transition will follow, and it will look something like this. So you have a Contone image that comes out of Photoshop. The process happens and it turns it into a halftone image. So again, nozzle spits or it doesn't. So with our printers are a Contone printer, and this process takes place on the printer. In the halftoning world, this process takes place in your RIP. So those are the key differences with a Contone versus halftone printer. So with halftone printers, the operator defines all the individual ink limits and the color limits per channel. And the operators also define the max ink limits, and they also define the light to dark balance. And the operators also define the screening. So some of the advantages of this is light to dark balances. You have better control over your pastels, your skin tones, and even you have more than 4 colors in some cases as well. And you have control over the total ink limit for the total ink limit for like a certain substrate. And you also can control over the ink amount and the combination to the speed. So the disadvantages are you have a complex linearization. In dye sublimation, the complexities only add because you're not only doing a linearization, but part of that, or part of the linearization process is scanning and well, it's printing the target, pressing the target, scanning the target, and also complex profiling. And also look at the need of an advanced need to know. You know, there's a lot more complexities that go into this, a lot more knowledge that needs to go into this. And also your rip times can be longer as well. So with a Contone printer, you have a fixed amount of ink related to the speed. The dithering and screening is all fixed, and your light to dark balance is all fixed and saved within the printer. The pre-linearization is also already integrated into the inside of the printer. So the advantages of this is it's an easy color management. So from out of the box to printing, it's already closer to ready to go out of the box. Printers take control of everything. So you know, your printer is doing the screening, the printer is doing the ink limiting, and all of those things. So your rip times are going to be faster. The disadvantages, less accessible controls because the controls are all in the printer, and less control over overall quality. So with HP Stitch, like we mentioned before, yes, it is a Contone printer. So where are we different? Well, the ease of use, the easy loading and unloading, the media solutions locator, which is, we'll talk about that next week when we talk about the deep dive in the applications. We'll look at the media locator as well, where we store our settings and our profiles. So when you add another printer, you don't have to go through all the rigorous color setup. All your settings are saved. They can be downloaded to the new printer. Also, it's easy to operate. So your quality is also controlled. You have a spectrophotometer. We'll look at it a little bit later when we go to the printer. It does automatic cleaning cycles, and we can also do an automatic nozzle check and nozzle replacement. So some of the advantages, one that we say a lot at HP, CLC. So what does a CLC mean? So it means it's a closed loop color or closed loop calibration. And so when we talk about the linearization or the color setup part, the color calibration setting is getting the condition of the printer and the media combination. So it's like looking at it's like taking a picture of the printer. So number 2, by printing or changing the settings of the performance, the printer will change. So the more you print, the more your printer will get out of whack. Your color will change. So especially on these printers, because with the stitch printers, you can the user can replace the print heads. So after a prolonged printing, so if you print a couple weeks, or if you've changed a print head, you'll need to rebalance your color. So by running this CLC or closed loop calibration on the printer, we were able to bring it back to square one by what we call closing the loop. To get back here, where you see the picture of the small boys, to get back to the beginning, traditionally with halftone printers, you have a re-linearization cycle that you have to do, and there's a lot of complexities with that. Here, we're able to do this on the printer. So another way to look at it, day one, day 50 or day 25, and then verify your color reference. So you'll see here after you print, you do the CLC and it brings the colors back to as close as possible to day 1. And so all this is also done before sublimation. So before you introduce heat, before you introduce variables, you can take a fingerprint or a picture of your printer at the point of day 1. So this makes it a very good option for fleet management because all the processing is done inside of the printer, and it gives you the possibility to sync the rest of your fleet. So it's very good for a fleet of printers on site and even a secondary site if you have them. And also you'll see on the right hand side it says cookbooks. We have a plethora of cookbooks in the Knowledge Center as part of PrintOS, and we can take a look at those next week when we dive into the applications. So another aspect of this printer is we have a Thermal Inkjet Printhead on these printers. So here we wanted to kind of put a comparison up. So Piezo Printheads are what a lot of our competitors have. So let's look at the differences between the Piezo Printhead versus a Thermal Inkjet Printheads, which is what we have. So with the Piezo, you have variable drop sizes, and also these printheads last longer than your Thermal Inkjet printheads. So they can also, for the cons, they're more expensive. There's less nozzles. There's about 4 times less nozzles than our printheads, and they are very sensitive to heat, and they are hard to replace. In some cases, they may be easier to replace, but that process still takes time. And in some cases, it can take a technician coming on site, which you have to wait longer to have your printer fixed. So with a Thermal Inkjet Printhead, the pros, you have a higher native resolution, even down into 1 pass and 2 pass. They are cheaper, they're thermal resistant, they're easy to replace. Now with the cons, you have a fixed dot or bigger droplet size in some cases, and they tend to die faster. But again, they are a fraction of the cost of a Piezo printhead. So drilling down into this a little bit further, does a drop size always matter, or does it always mean better quality? Well, in dye sub, it depends on the application, but as well, that dot, because it's sublimated, because it enters the fabric as a gas, the ink will explode, or it will transgress, or if that's even a word, it will go into the fibers of the fabric. So a dot on paper doesn't necessarily mean a dot on fabric, because that dye is going to explode or it's going to change in the sublimation process. So the advantages of being thermal resistant, we talked about that, as that was one of our pros for the Thermal Inkjet Printhead, is we can start adding the heat a lot sooner in the printing process. We'll look at this when we go on to the printer as well, but the drop and dry prints on dryer that we have, we are actually applying the heat in the print zone as it's printing. So we are able to start drying that drying process a lot faster. That cuts down on cockling. And this printer is a hybrid printer, meaning that it can print direct to fabric and paper very well. So with direct to fabric, you need to be able to start drying as soon as possible to allow better image quality and better take up. So advantages of a higher native resolution. So one of those is our smart nozzle compensation system. Now this will correct for nozzles out. So during the cleaning process, there is during the cleaning process, the ink will spit into this into the chamber in the optical drop detector, and it will be able to detect if there's any nozzles that are missing. If the nozzles are missing, it will try to clean and revitalize those nozzles. If it can't, then it goes into a smart nozzle compensation system. So again, it's still going to allow you to have high resolution and high image quality even in lower passes. And during the cleaning processes, it's going to either correct for this or compensate for this. So really quick 3-minute takeaway. I'll try to do it in under 3 minutes. So smaller ink droplets, we talked about that. Doesn't always mean better quality. There are advantages to the thermal resistance and also the advantages of higher native resolution, even in, like I said, in lower passes. All right, so next we're going to move into the printer, and if we want to, let's take a couple questions as I transition into the next segment.
So yeah, so I think the main question that I got was related to printheads. So you're going to be replacing the printhead, and you do have a closed loop system as you described. So so how does that, when you go about replacing the printhead, how do you go about maintaining consistency?
Yeah, so printheads. Hang on one second. Sorry about that.
No problem. So you've got a lot of background noise there. I think
Is that me?
let's see. You know, actually, Malaya had joined us. I shut off her microphone for the moment. I muted her for the moment. So
Okay.
sorry about that. But
No
she'll
worries.
be joining us in just a minute. But in any case, yeah, so go ahead and explain that.
So the printheads, so during that process, when you change a printhead, again, these are printheads that are user replaceable. And so when you change that, part of the process is the printer does an alignment, and then after that, it's going to tell you that the color calibration is obsolete. So you would run a color calibration at that point. Now, what that color calibration does is it prints a certain amount of patch set with a certain amount of colors per channel, and then the spectrophotometer on the printer reads that in, and it pulls the printer back down to the settings or the color that you achieved when you started off. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. So, and if you have a fleet, as you described, I mean, that's one of the benefits. You can go between the printers. So if you have an S300 or an S500, you can go between the printers, and through that closed loop calibration, you should be able to start off with a baseline on each of the printers and build from there.
Yes. So the benefit to this is if you have an S300, S500, S1000, you can use the same settings and you can sync them with all the printers. So from a 300 to a 300, you can do that. So the 300 to 500, you can also do that, but it enters what's called like an emulation type of setup. And what that does is the color that you get in your base printer, we'll call it. So if your base printer is an S500, and let's say you build a fleet of those and you build off of the same calibration you built on your base printer, all the other printers are going to reference to that one. They're not going to reference to themselves. They have all the color data that you synced in the cloud or and then synced with the other printers. It's going to base it off of that printer. If you add S1000s, you can take those settings. We call it an OMS file, and you can sync that OMS with an S1000, and then you do a CLC on the 1000, and it's going to set that printer up to the standards that you built on your S500. So building everything off of one printer and then just syncing to the new ones, you can absolutely do that in this case. And because of our thermal inkjet printheads and our contoning capabilities, it allows us to be able to do it this way. Traditionally, piezo printheads and halftone printers, everything is stored within the RIP, and so it can be a quite cumbersome feat when you're adding other printers and say other printer technologies to get all your colors balanced.
Perfect. I think that answers the questions for now. So I'll let you continue.
Good deal. So I just started the printer up. It's going to start out. It's going to start out printing in 2-pass, so you guys can see the speed of it. And then we're going to go to 3-pass, and then the rest of the jobs will be done on 4-pass. But to start out, we talked about the print head. I want to give you guys a quick show of what it looks like. A lot of you may be thinking, well, that looks like what's in my desktop printer. You're absolutely right. It is very close to what's in your desktop printer. And HP did this because they wanted to keep the thermal inkjet printhead technology, which they developed, but also we wanted to make it easy to use for your for printing. You know, for me, I have this printer in my basement, and if a printhead goes out, I don't have to call a technician to come here and to spend time here. It's very easy just to, and very nice to be able to pop this printhead out and pop a new one back in. 18 minutes is what it takes after you put a new printhead in. It does the automatic printhead alignments, and then after that, it's going to ask you to do a color calibration. Now, you don't have to do it, but my recommendation is you should do that. And the whole process, if you do the color calibration afterwards, it's going to take about 35 to 40 minutes. And that process for to be able to replace a printhead and dial your color back in at that moment, 30 minutes is time well spent to be able to do this. Again, this nozzle has 4 times more this printhead, sorry, has 4 times more nozzles than piezo printhead. And so that allows us to have a higher resolution, even down into 2-pass. 1200 by 1200 DPI for this printhead, even in 2-pass. If you want to achieve 1200 by 1200 in a piezo printhead, you have to add more passes. So that is some of the advantages that this printhead gives to this printer. Or yes. So we also talked about the drop and dry print zone dryer. This is what that looks like. So it's a fan system that sits behind the print zone, and it has a little resistor here. I think you guys can see that. So it's pulling in cold air from this side, and it's pulling cold air in from this way, and then blowing out the hot air on this side. And each one of these has a temperature sensor on it. And what is good about that is that it's not trying to take a reading in one side of the print zone. It's actually taking multiple readings all the way across the print zone to allow even heat all throughout. So we'll look at this a little bit more in the close-up, but there are diffusers in the back of the print zone where the hot air is being blown out. So this allows us to cut down on cockling, and that's where the ink isn't dry before it gets to this part of the take-up. And if it's not dry by here and it's trying to still dry, or it's maybe still wet when it gets down here to the actual take-up, it's going to cause take-up issues. Take-up issues can be a nightmare in dye sublimation, especially in the transfer in the calendar part. So if you have a lot of issues on your take-up here, you go to calendar this, it's going to have a lot of take-ups during the calendar process because it's not taken up evenly across, or you may have some stair stepping or some walking on each side of the take-up. So, but being able to add the heat in the print zone gives us high image quality. So if we want to keep talking about high image quality, we talked about the nozzle compensation system. So before each job, it does a cleaning, and that cleaning, and then if that cleaning, it goes into an optical drop detection, and this is the optical drop detector. It looks like this. This is the part that has an infrared light in it, and during the cleaning process, it spits ink into here, and it's going to be able to tell if there's any nozzles that are missing. If there are any nozzles missing, it's going to prolong that cleaning. If it can't recover them, then it goes into a compensation, nozzle compensation. So what that means is on the first pass, there'll be a band, and then it covers it up on the second pass. So let's say you had a nozzle or quite a few nozzles out in cyan, and then you would see that band on the first pass. The second pass, you would fire cyan on the second set of heads, and it would cover that nozzle out, the missing nozzle, sorry, on that next pass. Now, I will tell you, this happens at the beginning of a job, but if you nest jobs together, it's going to happen again after every fourth job. So just a little bit of information on that. So talking about image quality, this is, as you can see here, we just changed to a 3-pass, and it's tracking very well. It looks very good because of the print zone dryer. It's dry as it's coming out of the printer. And you'll notice there's no banding on it. Well, of course, we don't want any banding on it, but this printer has a couple features that allow it to adjust for any kind of banding that would happen in an advance. So when I was in production, we used to have to deal with feed composition. We would have to go in and set a feed composition. As the roll got bigger, we'd have to check for it again. On this printer, we have tension sensing winders, but we also have what we call an OMOS sensor. OMOS stands for Optical Media Advanced Sensor, and it looks like this. You really won't see this anywhere on the printer because it sits in the print zone under the print platen, and this is the only part that you'll see, and it's taking a picture of the back of the material. It's taking a picture of the fibers. It actually takes 16 pictures a second, and so it is capturing the advance, and how it's doing that is it's, like I said, taking a picture of the fibers on the back of the material, and it's checking to see if there's any deviation in that advance. If it detects a deviation, then it will adjust for that. So it will cover up a band that would happen with your advance. So let me start the next job over here. And as this starts to print, let's talk about the spectrophotometer. We talked a little bit about that in the slideshow, but this is what it looks like. It is an I1 spectrophotometer. It sits on the print platen. I'm sorry, on the carriage. And during the closed loop calibration, that is when it does the scanning. Now, this doesn't profile. Like our latex printers, the profiling still needs to be done offline, because at the profiling point, you are capturing the data or the color at its end use. So here on the printer, we're taking density readings to fingerprint your printer. For the profiling, you need to do that at its end use, so after it's sublimated. And at that point, you need to have a third-party profiling solution. With this printer, it comes out of the box with ErgoSoft, and we have HP color tools that you can utilize within that to do profiling. And so, but you have to do that at that point. That is done in your RIP offline from the printer.
Yeah, and that's stuff that IT Supplies, I mean, we can certainly help customers with that. And yes, you might need, so you're making the big moves with your closed loop calibration. So where you're controlling the ink density basically and giving consistency to the customer. And the profiling, like you said, is going to be post the process and allow us to fine tune from there the profiling, and that just involves like the new i1 Pro Plus or whatever kind of instrument you want to have, plus the software that you've described. So yeah, and if you do have questions about that later on, we're more than happy to answer those as well.
Absolutely. So moving forward, I did talk about that this was a hybrid printer. On this printer, you can take the platen out and put it in the ink collector. The ink collector for this printer, it lasts about 395 feet. So is this a flag printer 100% of the time? It's not. But could you do flags a couple times a week on this printer? Absolutely. And this ink collector, there's actually two of them that sit in the print zone. You take the platen out, you put this in its place, and the machine knows that you installed the ink collector as well. So this gives us very good opportunity to do direct to fabric. So flags, what do you want when you print flags? You want a good punch or a good pass through to the other side. On some of our flag material, not our flag materials, but some of the flag materials that are out in the market, we can get up to about 95% pass through, or 90%, I'm sorry, pass through. Again, that depends on the fabric or the material that you're using and the coatings that are on that material. We'll talk about that next week in our applications deep dive. So what else makes this printer stand out from the rest? Well, you'll notice this printer has a bulk ink system. The S500 comes with the bulk ink system. It's not an add-on. It's not an accessory. It's not big jugs that you pour ink into. Everything is enclosed in our cartridge. And as you can see, I just took this off while it's printing. So we have 775 milliliter ink cartridges on the printer that act as intermediate tanks. So the ink goes from the cartridge to the intermediate tank and then to the print heads. But also an added bonus here, you can see here, is each one of these cartridges is keyed, and these keys are set in different positions on each different cartridge. So that means that my cyan cartridge is only going to fit in my cyan space. Only my black is going to sit in black, and so on and so forth. So I pop this back on, and the printer stopped because it's the end of the job. Sorry, it's not. That didn't cause it to stop. But here you can see this application is mask. So masks are going to be a very big application, even as part of the new normal, as people are so calling it. And this printer is very well positioned for that market. Again, we'll talk more about these next week. So what you saw here was 4-pass. So with the inks here, you saw that I just took it off, put it back on seamlessly. There's no mess, no ink spill. And if you want to do some math, kind of something to, as an average, is that each liter lasts about 1,000 square feet. So each cartridge, it's a 3-liter ink cartridge, so it's about 3,000 square feet of printing per the cartridge. And if you completely run one of these bone dry, you have roughly 750 square feet of printing that you can still do after the cartridge is ended because of our intermediate tanks. Also, bird's eye view on this printer. 3 things that I can point out here real quick is the touch screen. It's like having an 8-inch, it's like having an iPad mini on the printer. It's very intuitive. We'll look at this a little bit better here in the close-up in a few minutes. But we also have a big open window on the printer. Now, this allows us to see what's going on inside of the print zone. We actually have a light that we can turn on and off. This comes with the printer. It's not an add-on. And one of the benefits to having this window on there is being able to see what's going on in the print zone. Not that you're going to have to worry about head strikes with this printer. But if I were to open this, it's going to let all the heat out. So it's good to have this window to see what's going on in there without having to keep this open, and it allows the heat to stay in, and it funnels it over the top of the print to ensure that it's drying. Now, if I were to trick this out and keep this open, it's going to be counterintuitive for this printer because it's going to allow the heat to escape and it's not going to dry it properly. The other thing is the take-up is right here at arm's length. So when I go to change out this roll, we'll look at this a little bit more in depth next week when we talk about applications, because we're going to do a paper application and we're going to do a direct to fabric. But I don't have to bend down very far to take this roll off. So if I have a big heavy roll, I'm not bending down and straining my back to replace this. Now also, there's a little lever right here. You would pull this lever up and this will transition down. And so your input roll would then be at this position, your take-up roll would be down there, and that allows you to change your input roll. Again, when it flips out here, it is also this high. So again, you're not bending down, you're not straining your back when you're putting on these rolls. So this makes it very good in an application or a space like mine, because I have only so much square footage in this room. So I'm able to take this printer, push it all the way back up against the wall, and I don't have to get to the back of it unless I want to turn it on or off. But I don't have to get on the back of it to load it and unload this printer. And then that gives us a huge square foot advantage as well, because now I could fit more printers in the square footage of a print room than I could with the traditional printers that have a back load on them. Now, if I wanted to, I could probably take another one of these printers and I could set it right here and I would be fine, because there are no spindles on this printer. So it makes it even smaller square footage, because I don't need the square footage to load and unload the spindle. Everything comes on and off right here. And so I could put them in a corner. So I could put one here and then I could put one perpendicular to it on the side and not have to worry about, you know, loading and unloading, because everything would be right there on the front of it. So I think that's it for the technologies on this printer. The next part, we want to go into close-ups. So as I transition into the close-ups, here's a good spot for some more questions, if anybody would have any of those.
Sure. Well, and I just want to quickly mention that while you were speaking, I did go. One thing HP and you guys have been great about is creating these cookbooks and making them available to the public. So while I included the S300 and S500 stitch information, I also grabbed a few of the cookbooks, and there are many. So and I added them to the handout section that people will see on their screen. So you've got a consistent color on the stitch cookbook, easy profiling for stitch, how to run backlit for stitch. So some examples of what these cookbooks look like. And again, as I always say, you know, if you guys out there do have any questions, feel free to reach out to your customer service representative. The commercial team is always ready to help you and find these resources with you. So, just great job, Jeremy, on having HP having those kind of things available for your customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed about HP, is that we're very customer centric. So, you know, we're not going to just put something out there and say, good luck. You know, we're going to put stuff out there and say, well, here's how you can do it. If you have any questions, here's an easy place to go, and a place that you can download what you want, and even the cookbooks. You know, for me, that's a great hub of assets that we can that we provide. You know, and speaking on those cookbooks, you know, you can also, like we talked about it with PrintOS, we're going to talk more about it next week about PrintOS, but I want to show you something here. So I'm going to move over to my mobile camera, and this is the print screen. So it is touchscreen, so I can move it around. It's printing. It tells me the job, tells me the time remaining. So this job has 3 minutes left. This is a 4-pass job. But we talk about cookbooks and we talk about giving customers what they need. That if I go here to Substrate Library, you will see here in a second that we have available, well, this is what I have available in the printer, but we also have things available online. And not only can you get to them from a PC through PrintOS, but you can also get to them on your printer. So let's say I want to do a transfer paper, and I have JetX paper. I select that, and I click search, and it's going to pull up this profile. So the profile is this media set, I'm sorry, is a printer, or not a printer, a paper and a fabric that is tied to it. So again, out of the box, you can download profiles as well. Now, if you look at this online, it will also tell you the setup for this media set, meaning we're going to tell you what heat that we ran it with, what time and temperature that we ran this with. So again, very well set up to have what you need at your fingertips.
So does that validated, that means it was independently validated by HP, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. And there's a plethora of things on here. There's more transfer than there is direct right now, but we are aggressively adding to this every day. So keep checking back. There'll be even more in here. So beyond that, what does this thing look like printing? This is a 4-pass. And I'm trying to get to a place where there's not much reflection. But you can see the speeds here as well. Now you'll see those black air vent looking things in the back of the print zone. Those are our diffusers, and they're blowing out hot air. So if we were all on site in a demo, I would ask you to hold your hands here, and you can actually feel the heat coming out. So the heat's being applied in the print zone as it's printing. Now, if this happened with a piezo printhead, it would dry the printhead out. And if you are wondering, there is no air blowing underneath the carriage. There is there's a piece of metal or plastic, I'm not sure what, but it's a blocker on the back of the carriage, and it's not going to allow any air to go underneath that carriage. So you don't have to worry about your drop getting blown or any of that. So
I'm noticing you don't have any cockling, so that's another big thing right there.
yep, you have smooth prints. So this is a good bit of color, but again, it is being dried as soon as it's printing. So down here we talked about the input. Again, we'll look at more of this next week, but you can see how it's stationed within the printer. It's right under the print zone. This part will move out and it will pop forward. And another thing I like about HP is anytime you see this little periwinkle blue, this is a touch item. So this means it's an action item. So that means that this does something. This is going to pull this out. If you look at it here, this is what turns on your take-up motors, and you can either push it forward or you can push it backwards. On this printer, you need to wait till the printer dings. So I would hold this forward until it dings, and it's going to know that it's set up for forward take-up. If I push it backwards and hear it ding, it's going to set up for a rear take-up. And what I mean by rear take-up is when the paper is in the back being taken up instead of in the front. So again, there's blue here. That means this is an action item. And I didn't mean to push it. So you'll see that on each one of these. And you'll also notice this on our print heads. So when you open up the printer or open up the carriage, you'll see when you take the print heads will be sitting in there like this. When you go to take them out, you pull this little handle up to pull them out. Again, it's an action item. So just even down into the details with this printer. So back to the screen. I guess it's doing that because I popped the cartridge off, but I was going to show you a couple of things there. But while we're waiting for that, I want to show you this. So a lot of people ask me, well, how did you get this printer to work in your home? Do you have 220? No, I don't have 220. This printer takes 220 voltage, but I was able to get this converter. Now this converter I got off Amazon for 160 bucks. So it makes it a very good option in case you don't have the ability to ramp up or to step up to 220. So there are some other options as well. This one, it looked like a good deal, so I got it, and I have had no problems with it here. So just something to note. We do have these are available. It's an available option, I should say. We don't sell it, but we can point you in the right direction. So here at the bottom, again, very intuitive interface. So quick solutions, if you're having any kind of issues, it will give you a menu of what you can do and what to look at. It's a very good place to go and to print a test plot if you have to. Maintenance routines, it's going to tell you, it's going to list out all of these here, and then you can go in and do these. So like the ink collector install, when you go to do that, you start here. You can also start this when you check or when you change your media as well. There's a button to check to install your ink collector. So if you're running into any image problems or whatever, like if you see horizontal or vertical banding, it's going to walk you through some of the steps. In a lot of cases, it's probably time to do. If you encounter these, it's gonna have to do with maybe if you're printing direct to fabric and the OMOS doesn't see the fibers in the fabric, you may have to turn your OMOS off and do a setup for immediate advance. And the cool thing about setting up that immediate advance is because we have tension sensing winders, you do that at the beginning and you don't have to do it again. And then also if you have like horizontal banding or vertical banding, you may have your print heads are out of alignment, so it's time to do those again. So again here, if I go to roll and I look here, so this paper that I'm using, well, it's time for me to do a color calibration on this, and it will tell you right here that it's obsolete. Now after you change a print head, it's going to tell you that it's advisable to do a color calibration. But let's say you don't change a print head and you've been printing for weeks. Well, after a certain amount of nozzle fires, it's going to pop up here and say it's obsolete. It's recommended to do a color calibration. And it makes it very easy. If I want to do that, I just sit here, I just click on it right there. So again, you don't have to go into your RIP, send a target, print the target, press the target, and let's say you get to into your relinearization process and it says, hey, it's advisable to redo this profile and setup, then you have a lot more work to do. Here, it's going to do the color calibration, and it's going to set everything to the reference that it set when you set up your media.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yep.
I got a couple of questions, and if you don't mind, Malaya is going to be taking over in just a minute for me, but I wanted to get these questions out that we just got in.
Okay.
One of which is all of the literature for the stitch model says that they aren't meant to do long runs of direct to fabric. So how much is it actually rated for? How many square feet, or why is that in particular that it says that?
So from my guess on it, I'm not looking at it right now, but I think it's talking about the ink collector. So if you're going to use the ink collector for direct to fabric, then you have a certain amount of run that you'll go through before you need to replace that ink collector. So like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to do flags, and the amount of ink pass through on a flag is going to fill up that ink collector pretty quick. And that ink collector is going to fill up in about 395 feet. So from what I mean, I'm not looking at the document right now, but that is from what I'm guessing with it.
Yeah, and that's for flags, you're saying. So the thicker the material, the less pass through, thereby
right.
get a longer run. And if you're doing like a thicker material, like say for tablecloths or something, you might have no pass through. So then there's really no issues with doing a longer run, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, and it's advisable too if you're going to print direct to fabric. So I'll show you this real quick. So this material right here, you print on the inside of it, and then the back of it is a black back. This is a very good direct printable material, and you don't have to use the ink collector with it because there is no pass through. It's got a block on the back of it. Now, if I were to use like a knit fabric and print direct, it's still advisable to use the ink collector because there's going to be a little bit of pass through. And with that pass through, if you have the platen down, you're gonna get ink on the platen over time. You're gonna cover up your OMOS sensor, which is gonna cause all kinds of issues with your take up. And so it's advisable to use the ink collector. Now, that's not going to fill up as fast as it is this flag because there's not as much pass through. So again, you at that point, I would just keep an eyeball on your ink collector, and when it gets to a certain amount, when it's really wet, then it's time to replace that. But you're not going to go through it as quick as you would if you printed flags all the time.
Yeah, so direct to fabric, the answer is really no problem if it doesn't require the ink collector, but the ink collector is your limiting factor, is basically what we're dealing with. So, and then the other quick questions came from the converter. Of course, people want to know if they can use that on their latex printer, but you know, honestly, I think that the big question here, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, I think I might, but does that inverter affect your warranty? Because, you know, and I think it might, but I want you to. So it's something that I know HP has not recommended in the past, because, you know, there could be fluctuations or whatever, but we just want to be clear about that for customers.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know all the terms with it, if it would void the warranty or not. That would be something that we could track down for you. But for me, it's just to show that there are options, but nothing that we're recommending. You know, I'm not going to say what brand that is, but it, you know, it's something that worked. But again, you know, and it's going to be a little bit different with your latex as well. I don't know that much about the latex machine. Since I've been at HP, I'm been 100% stitch, and you would want to do your homework on that because it has two power sources, right? So your printer has a power source, and your heater has a power source. So again, you know, do your homework with it. Be very careful with it. Don't just, you know, go buy something and decide this or that, but just be very careful. Reach out to IT supplies, and you guys have been very involved with us, so we can, you know, get something together, and work on a plan if it's something that is needed.
Excellent. Well, and at this point, I'm handing off to Malaya, so she's going to be working with you for the rest of this. So,
Awesome.
So thank you so much, and continue.
Good. So thanks for the time, Bob. Hope to talk to you soon. So, any other questions?
No, at this point, I don't see any other questions. So Malaya, I guess, is coming on in just a second, but go ahead, continue on if you have more that you want to go over.
I think I wrapped it up. If there's anything else that you want to see, you know, on here, I can talk about this real quick. So if you order the print heads, they come in a box. It looks like this. Again, very much like a like your desktop printer would. Also, feeds and speeds. I'll hit this really quick on the S500. So you saw today, you saw 2 pass, you saw 3 pass, and 4 pass. So 2 pass is 665 square feet an hour. 3 pass is 460 square feet an hour. That's 3 pass. And 4 pass is 365 square feet an hour. Those are the print modes that I go to the most. 2 pass, I'm very careful about what applications that I use for it, mainly home decor or something that it has a lot of lighter colors, and not a lot of solid colors, because you can get banding in your lower passes, which is, we can print on 1 pass on this. I don't recommend 1 pass, but those are some of the applications I guess I would use for 2 pass. 3 pass and 4 pass, you know, on up into your soft signages. 4 pass, I feel like it's very good. The only reason I would run up to a 6 pass is if I had a solid fill that took up most of the printer, and I was seeing some banding in it. But honestly, I haven't seen any banding in 4 pass. And it's kind of where I tend to end or the highest pass that I'll go. I've even done some backlits in 4-pass. Now I would say if you're going to do direct to fabric, that may be the time to move up to a 4-pass or 6-pass, because you can get a little bit more density, a little bit of more rip resolution in 6-pass as well. So I think for me, I think I've covered the gamut here on the printer. Just to recap, we talked about the differences between contone and halftone. We also talked about the differences between Piezo Printhead versus Thermal Inkjet Printhead. I also walked you guys through the technologies of the printer, with the printhead, the drop and dry prints on dryer, the nozzle compensation system and the optical drop detector, and even the spectrophotometer that is on this printer. First dye sub printer to have the spectrophotometer as well. And we also talked about the 3-liter ink cartridges. Something to note as well with the printheads, printheads last 8 liters, around 8 liters. And then we also have a maintenance cartridge. So for this printer, it lasts 25 liters. And it's a cartridge that when it's done, the printer will tell you that it's depleted and it's time to take that one out and replace a new one. That whole process takes about 10 minutes. So, and one of the advantages to that is that you're optimizing the cleaning system for your printheads. Traditionally, a lot of wiper systems that are used, the wipers will dry out, they'll shrink, they'll start to again, just dry up. And you have to constantly adjust or worry about replacing those over time as they get older and older. Here, we're constantly replenishing the cleaning system that is actually cleaning the printheads. So it's going to give you longevity as well. So with that being said, if there's not any more questions, I'll hand it over to Malia. But if there are any questions, please feel free to post those and we'll get those answered for you.
Hey, Jeremy, it looks like we don't have any other questions. You did get a comment about having really good looking hair. So there's that. But awesome. I did want to thank you. I wanted to thank you so much. This was really great information. So now I just want to thank everybody, and this concludes our webinar. Thank you so much again, Jeremy. Awesome. We'll be back next Tuesday again with Jeremy for part 2 about the HP Stitch. So be on the lookout for more information on new series, videos, and much, much more. You can go on our website and check out all of the different videos and some upcoming webinars that we have on there for training. So again, thank you to all of our attendees. You've been tremendous, and have a great rest of your day, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for watching this. If you would like to see more of these videos, please go to our YouTube channel.